one positive aspect as well is that you get to touch and try new things. Like, for example, graphic design, like maybe you've never done it, you try it, and then you realize, wow, I love this. And then that's like a whole new avenue that you can explore and have fun. One thing that you did very early on was just like self-release. And I think you're like, at least in drum and bass, like all your first releases were self-releases. How did you look back on that choice, I guess, you made? Because I'm still on the fence on self-releases, and we can get into that later. But how did you look back on that like journey of starting to self-release yourself?
I think wholly just looking back on it, I think it was a positive thing. Like what I set out to do, it was less, like for me, it was less about necessarily like the writing music. It was just kind of like the learning the process of releasing, and then everything that goes with that, like from like the metadata and scheduling, and oops, I forgot to write the name correctly, and now it's in Spotify wrong, or it got rejected. Learning that whole process, then designing terrible artwork, basically Microsoft Paint level. Like, let's put this together with my demo of Photoshop. No idea what I was doing, but it's like that incremental process of learning to do it all yourself and kind of wear all the hats and, be your own like head of department, I guess is a way to put it. That helped me kind of, I think it's why I'm like I kind of know what's going on now. Like I did my best to kind of learn every little thing that goes on to where we're in like the position I am now. I can just like, hey, though, so you're like actually a department person that handles just artwork, or you handle just like digital releases. I know a little bit about this, so I'm not just kind of sitting in a conversation like, that's a cool idea. I don't know what you're talking about, but you seem professional.
Sounds very businessy to me.
Yeah, and then there's also, out of just like the business, I don't know, clerical work side, there's you being able to take charge of what you're doing. Like you schedule your releases, you don't have to wait for an entire year for something to come out. If something hits, it's because of you. If something like flops, or I don't know, that's probably not the best term, but like it's all on you. And if you take it as like just learning, no matter what happens, you're constantly progressing as just like a more well-rounded artist, I think. And just more I keep saying business, but I don't feel like that's the right word. Like you're business minded, but you're more just like,
but
you get the bigger picture. Yeah,
business is fine. I feel like business is like this bad word in music.
Yeah, exactly.
I studied business and I work in like big business and stuff. But I love music. I'm doing a podcast like dedicated to drum and bass. And I don't know. Business isn't a bad word. Like there's a big part of music that is business if you want people to hear your music, and that's just a fact.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and I think so. Just like going through self-releases and learning like that process from like the first one, like when I had no idea what I was doing, to the last one where I got it into the hands of like Dave Jenkins at UKF, and he was like loving the tracks. Like, where'd you come from? How'd you do all this? I'm like, I'm just like slowly building up. Zero social life, by the way, but I learned all these cool things on them over those years. Yeah. But it stemmed from like me just realizing at some point, like I could release on like these smaller labels, and like it'd be fine, but there's a point in that I like, you realize that like a lot of the, like for the music I was releasing, it really wasn't that great. But I mean, you can get any song on a label, really, if that's what you want to do. And I've already done like the tick off. I got a label release, so now it's just like, what can these labels? Again, because it's like it's a give and take. What can these labels do for me? It's like, well, I could learn to do all these things, get whatever little bit of royalties I get back 100% and
Mm.
still learn something in the process,
Mm.
instead of give my song away, get 50 cents out of the dollar that I make out of it, and then someone just kind of, it just sits in somebody's library
Mm.
for a while. And it's like, if I can just learn to do these things, why not just take that time? Because it'll be worth it in the end.
Mm.
But it's such a drag to learn. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I love it, but it's such like, if your mind's not set on learning things and failing a lot just to learn in the process and like figure things out, it can hurt that much more because you are responsible for your success even more than like normal.
Yeah.
Like, you can write a great track and then give it to a label and they do no promotion, so it does nothing. But if you write a great track and you're the one that didn't do the good job, then it's like you can only blame yourself at that point.
Yeah.
There's so like anything, it's so complicated, but I feel like it's worth it in the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there has to be a level of commitment to
Mhm.
like artwork and promotion. Like you can't really half-ass these
No.
things. Like your artwork, either it looks good or it doesn't, and it, like you have to
Yeah.
put in. And that's like one, I don't know, like not an issue, but like reservation I have about self-releasing is that like should you be good at everything, like, or should you like focus, because that's time you're not spending on making music. And
Yeah.
I feel sometimes as a up and coming producer you should be focusing all your time on music and then delegating the rest to people that know how to do it. That's still possible while self-releasing, like it's not
Yeah.
one or the other. But yeah, that's like one area where like I don't know, it's up to everybody. The other thing I'm always curious about when you self-release is quality control. And obviously if you're aiming for tiny labels, then you might not always have that quality control. But if you're aiming for just like not the huge labels, but labels with a good enough imprint and that you respect, they'll tell you if your tracks aren't good enough. How did that work when you were like self-releasing?
And it's weird. It's like you just have to be like annoyingly, I don't know, like self-aware almost to be like, is this good? Do I think this is good? And you can't get rid of it, like your ego, but you have to just put it at bay, because there's a point where like, no, this is really good, like I did really good, and then you're like, as soon as you put it out, like, why doesn't anyone listen to this? It's so good. It's like and then you finally hit that realization. It's like, okay, there are like good parts of it, but as a whole you could have done better, and do realize that people are listening to your song next to these other ones, and like eventually if they listen to you long enough they'll get used to what you're doing and be, I guess, more accepting. But there still is always just like this unknown level or like bar to reach. And there's your own level, which I guess answers kind of more of your question, is like, I know what I like to listen to, and I know what I feel makes a good song or a good track. So I just kind of, you really have to think about it and just kind of, if you write things down, make lists, do that. If you keep it in your head, do that. But you have to be like acutely aware of these things. So and I know you're not supposed to like qualify art and things in a certain way. But when it comes to like trying to put together a project, like an EP, say 3 or 4 tracks, you want them to kind of relate to each other. You want them to sonically sort of sound the same. You want to put it in another business term, a package with artwork and naming. And it is necessary, but it doesn't have to be as like daunting or, I don't know, evil as it might sound. It can just be like, you have to find your way to do it. And to like, for me, I think I've always been kind of a good critic of myself, of just being aware of like, is this the best I can do? Or either it's the best I can do right now and I'm still learning, or it's like, okay, go back to that, keep working on it. Then there's the the kind of the good side of comparison. Like, listen to your favorite, you know, producer. What do they do? It's like, okay, well, I can't mix down as well as Alex Perez, but I mean, some of my ideas kind of work, and I can get as close to that as I can for this project. And the next project, I try to get a bit closer. And then you just kind of work and work and work to do, like, you know, try to make it the project as best as you can. And outside of yourself, you have to be able to have like at least a friend or someone else you can trust to like give you that good feedback, tell you, hey, this is terrible, or not. Well, if they're your friend, they'll probably tell you it's terrible right off. They're like, but you can work on this, and you can work on this. But then, you know, they're like, I know what you normally make. I know what you're trying to aim for. So let me help you push you towards that. You know, just somebody you can, just for another set of ears, just to be like, hey, this is good, or this is on the way, or something like that. Like, they're your own like personal A&R almost.
Yeah.
Just to help you out. And it's just kind of going back and forth with all of that. It's a lot. And I'm not even touching it all, but just like trying to like think of it as just like, I really thought of this every day. That's why no one likes me. It's like, I can't tell you what happened in the news, but I can talk to you about promotion strategies and all this stuff all day. But yeah, it's such a process.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, it's kind of like how I started with. It's just being like aware of yourself and of what you want and what you're trying to achieve, and just basically not settling for less. And if you do, not necessarily less, but settle for the idea that you know you can do better next time, and you can keep progressing. Like, your next EP doesn't have to be next week. You can just take a month or two, you know.
Yeah.
And you're balancing all around like your regular life. So it's like nothing, like, you're on your schedule at that point. You can do things as you want. The pressure is you and like your expectations, and you're trying to live up or rise up to your expectations. So part of that is good, because like, you know what you want, you have your idea of what you want, and you want to reach that. But you also have to keep in mind of, am I asking myself too much, or am I being too hard on myself? And I'm just going to keep going in the circle. It all relates, but there's so much to think about.
No, yeah. I think it's always a tricky balance between being like self-critical and self-aware, but not overthinking everything. Like, and I'm even like talking like beyond music and just like mental well-being and stuff. It's like, you don't need to question everything that you're feeling or thinking all the time, but there is that level of self-awareness that is important. And I like the idea of expectations, and I've talked about this in the past, to have it's important to have dreams, but it's important to have realistic expectations. Like, if you're if you've been producing for 6 months, like, don't compare your early sketch to Alex Perez, for example, because then you're just going to be demoralized. Exactly. So it's important to have expectations. What I usually say, have expectations in line with the work or the effort that you're putting in. I talk sometimes about like playing at Liquidity, like very long term. That would be like a dream. But right now I'm never DJing. I've never DJed live or anything. So that's more like a dream. Like, it's not an expectation, so to speak, because I'm not like putting in the work to do it. So yeah, it's all about finding that balance. And just to close off on the like self-release thing and doing everything yourself, I think one positive aspect as well is that you get to touch and try new things. Like, for example, graphic design. Like, maybe you've never done it, you try it, and then you realize, wow, I love this. And then that's a whole new avenue that you can explore and have fun. And it comes back to something you've talked about before on your channel and podcast, like just the importance of just trying things. And that's something I really echo, is like, just try. Like, what's the worst that can happen?
That's all. If I do anything, it's just try. If this idea works, awesome. If it doesn't work, you either try and figure out why it didn't and then try it again, or just like table it for later, or never do it again and never speak of it, you know. But at least you tried.
Yeah.
That's always worth it. At least one.
Yeah.